The loudest laughter that arena had ever heard turned out to be the greatest mistake an empire ever made. I was standing barely 30 feet from the imperial throne when it happened, close enough to hear every whispered insult before the whole galaxy burst out laughing. My name is Commander Talon, captain of the Imperial Honor Guard. For more than 20 years I had shielded emperors, ambassadors, and champions from 100 civilizations, and I was certain I had already seen every impossible thing the galaxy could produce. Then one human soldier quietly tore apart everything I believed about victory. The Grand Convergence Arena rose nearly 2 miles beneath a shimmering crystal dome, ringed by more than 100,000 spectators, and broadcast to billions across imperial space. For weeks the finest warriors of hundreds of worlds had fought, and only one remained undefeated: Mason Carter. The human stood alone at the center of the platform in a plain white combat uniform smudged with dust and tournament marks. No ceremonial decorations, no gilded armor, no pride on his face at all. He simply waited as the emperor rose from the crystal throne. Ancient law granted every champion a single reward chosen from the treasures of the empire. Whole fleets had changed hands at this ceremony. Noble houses had traded planets for the honor. Even royal titles had shifted because of victories earned in that arena. The emperor swept his hand across the prizes arranged on the platform. Rare energy crystals glowing beneath golden light, legendary weapons resting in transparent cases, deeds to prosperous star systems drifting above elegant pedestals. Mason barely glanced at them. His eyes moved past the priceless artifacts, past the military honors, past the powerful nobles gathered beside the throne, and settled on someone almost everyone else had learned to ignore. Princess Sarah's Vera stood a few steps behind the other royal heirs, set apart more by reputation than by distance. While her sisters accepted flattery from senators and ambassadors, Sarah stayed silent, her silver-blue skin catching the palace lights as though she wished no one would notice she was there at all. Across the empire she had a name, the Forgotten Princess. Noble families avoided alliances with her. Generals dismissed her opinions before she could speak. Even the servants had quietly decided her future was already over. Mason raised his hand. "I choose the princess." Silence swallowed the arena. For one perfect heartbeat, not a single voice made a sound. Then the laughter hit like a breaking wave. Alien nobles howled. Wealthy merchants clapped in mockery. Foreign champions shook their heads. One senator stood and shouted loud enough for half the stadium to hear. The human crossed the galaxy to claim the least valuable prize in the empire. More laughter followed. Princess Sarah's lowered her eyes without a word. She had clearly heard those words 1,000 times before. Mason never reacted. His breathing stayed level. His face never changed. The emperor studied him carefully. "Champion, you understand this choice cannot be reversed." Mason nodded once. "That is exactly why I made it." Before the emperor could continue, the ceremonial floor shifted beneath our feet. Ancient rings of blue light bloomed around the arena as armored challengers stepped onto the platform. By imperial law, their leader bowed to the throne, then turned to face the human. "Every champion may be challenged before he claims a royal reward," he announced. "If your judgment is truly worthy of the empire, prove it." The crowd roared again, certain the human had finally made the first mistake of his remarkable career. Mason looked at each challenger and smiled, just barely. And standing a few yards away, I understood something the cheering thousands had missed completely. He did not look surprised. He looked like a man who had been waiting for exactly this moment all along. The rings of blue light widened into a perfect circle nearly 100 yards across. The challengers took their positions with drilled precision, while imperial judges hovered above in transparent chambers. Princess Sarah stayed beside the throne, hands folded, every insult in the stadium still echoing around her. Mason simply straightened his cuffs and walked to the center of the circle as though arriving for a quiet conversation. Commander Varric, leader of the challengers, saluted the Emperor. Imperial tradition requires that any champion who claims a royal prize prove judgment equal to his strength. We will not test your power, we will test your decision. The judges lit the arena. Countless holographic pathways spread beneath our feet, forming an intricate tactical field of shifting platforms, raised bridges, and glowing markers. The first objective appeared above the field for the entire galaxy to read. Reach the central platform while holding complete control of your assigned territory. Varric smiled. His challengers split into tight formations, sealing every direct route to the objective. Across the Empire, military analysts began calling the outcome before it had even begun. Almost every projection favored the aliens. Mason did not move. He studied the shifting pathways beneath the challengers. 5 seconds passed, then 10. Nervous whispers rippled through the crowd. A senator laughed again. The human cannot even decide where to begin. But Princess Sarah's never looked away from him, and somehow she seemed less worried than anyone else in the stadium. Finally, Mason took a single step, not toward the center, away from it. The laughter swelled. Commentators openly wondered whether exhaustion had finally caught the undefeated champion. Confident he had abandoned the shortest route, Varric ordered his formation forward. That was exactly what Mason wanted. As the challengers advanced together, 2 moving platforms locked into place behind them. The tactical system instantly registered that their own movement had narrowed their future options. Amber warnings flared beside every challenger. Mobility reduced. Varric frowned for the first time. Mason kept walking, never rushing, letting the arena itself open a fresh path straight toward the objective. He had never been fighting the challengers at all. He had been playing against the rules that governed the arena. The realization spread through the judges almost at once. One elderly strategist leaned toward another and murmured. He read the system before he read his opponent's. Varric tried to reorganize, but every correction forced another somewhere else, and his flawless formation slowly became his cage. Mason reached the final platform in smooth, deliberate steps, while the challengers stood trapped behind their own decisions. The arena flashed brilliant blue, objective complete, maximum efficiency awarded to the human. The laughter died instantly. 100,000 spectators stared in silence. Even foreign commanders traded uneasy glances, because none of them had expected victory to arrive without a single blow. Varric approached him. You knew exactly where we would move. Mason smiled. No, I knew exactly where you believed I would move. Princess Sarah's lifted her head, just slightly. For the first time since the ceremony began, she watched the court look at the human with curiosity instead of amusement. And beside the Emperor, I understood that this was no longer a test of whether the princess was worthy. It was fast becoming proof that the human understood the Empire better than the Empire understood itself. The Emperor raised the ancient scepter of accord. The first challenge is complete. The second trial will determine whether the champion can recognize true leadership. Several courtiers exchanged knowing smiles. Many believed this challenge had been built to expose Mason's mistake for good. The arena transformed. Crystal pillars rose from the floor, each displaying the records of the Empire's royal heirs, military honors, diplomatic wins, economic reforms, scientific breakthroughs, public approval. Above every prince and princess the numbers floated for all to judge. Sarah stood at the end of the line, nearly every category rated lower than the rest. Whispers spread through the crowd. The display seemed to confirm everything the Empire had believed for years. The chief royal advisor turned to the human. Explain your decision. Every measurable record says another heir would strengthen the Empire more than Princess Sarah's. What did you see that every advisor, general, and senator missed? Every camera fixed on Mason, every spectator leaned in. Mason glanced at the floating records only briefly, then looked to the princess. "May I ask her one question instead?" The emperor nodded. Mason faced Sarah's with quiet respect. "If you became ruler tomorrow, what would be your first order?" She looked to the emperor, who encouraged her with a small nod. After a thoughtful pause, she answered softly, "I would spend 1 year visiting every frontier colony before making a single new law. A leader should understand the people she serves before expecting those people to understand her." The arena went completely still. Mason smiled. "That is why I chose her." Confused murmurs filled the stadium. An influential senator shot to his feet. "That answer proves nothing." Mason turned to him without raising his voice. "It proves everything. Every other record measures what she has already been allowed to accomplish. Her answer reveals what she intends to become, once someone finally gives her the chance." Something in that struck the chief advisor. He reopened the historical archive and searched the recorded words of past emperors. Several long moments passed. Then his expression changed entirely, and he looked toward the throne in disbelief. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "the founding empress gave almost this exact answer before her coronation." Gasps swept the arena. Historians hurried to verify the ancient transcript. The words matched almost perfectly. For generations, the empire had measured titles and popularity. Yet its greatest ruler had once spoken with the same quiet humility as the forgotten princess standing before them now. Varric bowed his head toward Mason. "You did not choose the weakest heir. You chose the one everyone else forgot to understand." I watched the doubt drain from 1,000 alien faces. For the first time since the ceremony began, the crowd was no longer asking why the human had chosen her. They were beginning to ask why none of them had chosen her first. The emperor raised his hand, and the arena fell silent. "The final examination will now begin. If the champion succeeds, no voice in the empire may question his judgment again." The floor split apart, revealing a second platform suspended above a shimmering energy field 50 feet below. 12 Imperial Guardians entered in identical mirror-bright armor, chosen not because they were the strongest, but because each represented a different military academy across the empire. Their commander bowed. "Champion, this measures leadership under pressure. Guide your chosen companion across the arena while our formation blocks your advance. No unnecessary force, no reckless action. Victory belongs to the leader who reaches the final gate while preserving order." The crowd instantly favored the Guardians. Their line stretched across the whole platform with barely a visible seam. Analysts gave any single individual less than a 3% chance of crossing without breaking the ceremonial rules. Mason looked to Princess Sarah's. "Walk beside me. Do not watch them, watch me." She nodded without hesitation, and the challenge began. The Guardians advanced with flawless coordination, steadily closing every route to the far gate. Senators smiled, sure the human had finally met a problem with no answer, but Mason never sped up. Each step stayed measured, and instead of forcing through the line, he adjusted his pace until the Guardians themselves began compensating for his movement. Their disciplined reactions opened tiny gaps between them, nearly invisible from the stands, but Mason saw every one. He guided Sarah's gently toward the first opening before it could close. The crowd gasped. A Guardian shifted to seal it and unknowingly created another gap further ahead. Mason changed direction without warning. Again the formation reacted. Again a path appeared. The Guardian stayed perfectly disciplined, yet every attempt to contain the human slowly produced the exact route he needed. Standing beside the Emperor, I finally understood what set this human apart from every commander I had ever served. He never fought against discipline. He let discipline reveal its own predictable rhythm. The last barrier sealed itself directly before the gate, Every spectator expected Mason to stop. Instead, he turned to Sarah's. "Your turn." She studied the formation for only a moment, then took 3 careful steps exactly where Mason had been looking. The lead guardian instinctively moved aside to keep his ceremonial spacing, and the gate slid open on its own. Blue light flooded the arena. Challenge complete. Maximum leadership score awarded. Thunder broke from every section of the stadium. The 12 guardians stepped back and bowed together to both the human and the princess, and I realized the true victory was not that Mason had reached the gate. It was that he had quietly taught the forgotten princess to lead an entire empire before anyone else even noticed the lesson had begun. The applause carried on long after the judges confirmed the trials complete, but the loudest voices in the empire had suddenly gone quiet. Senators who had mocked the human now avoided his eyes. Then the celebration stopped cold. A deep metallic tone rang through the palace as ancient mechanisms beneath the crystal throne woke for the first time in countless generations. Great rings of white crystal rose from the platform, wrapping the throne in streams of golden light. The chief archivist stared at the symbols forming across them and spoke in disbelief. "The Founder Archive has activated." Confused whispers spread. Most scholars believed the legendary archive had gone permanently dark thousands of years ago. By imperial history, it responded only when a forgotten condition of succession was fulfilled. Even the emperor looked genuinely stunned. No living ruler has ever witnessed this. The archive projected thousands of shimmering records into the air, every emperor and empress stretching back to the earliest days of the empire. Then all of them vanished except one, the first empress. Her recorded voice filled the silent arena. "The future of this empire will not be secured by the heir most loved by the crowd. It will belong to the heir first recognized by one who judges character above reputation. When the forgotten heir is chosen freely by the greatest outsider, open the founder record." A hidden chamber rose beneath the throne, cradling an elegant crystal tablet covered in ancient symbols. The archivist translated it, his voice beginning to tremble. The founding laws never declared that succession belonged to the most celebrated royal child. They declared that it belonged to the heir first recognized by wisdom before popularity. Gasps rolled across the arena. Noble houses began frantically reviewing centuries of accepted tradition. Everything they thought they knew about succession had rested on incomplete records. Mason walked toward the tablet and stopped several feet away. He never reached for it. He looked to Princess Sarah's. "This belongs to you." She hesitated. "Everyone else deserves it more." Mason smiled gently. "That is exactly why everyone else overlooked you." Encouraged, Sarah's laid one hand on the ancient tablet. The arena blazed with golden light. Every crystal around the throne lit at once, and the Founder Archive confirmed her recognition before the entire empire. Varric removed his ceremonial insignia and bowed. One by one the guardians followed. Senators stood. Admirals stood. Even foreign ambassadors honored the moment in silence. No one had ordered it. They simply understood that history had changed in front of them. And I understood that the human had never crossed the stars for treasure or titles. He had come because he recognized worth hidden beneath years of quiet rejection. The greatest victory had never belonged to the champion alone. It belonged to the forgotten princess, whom only one human had been wise enough to see. Not everyone welcomed it. Before sunrise, the Imperial War Council called an emergency session in the Hall of Command, gathering every senior fleet commander around a holographic table 60 feet across. At its center stood General Kaler Thrax, the most respected commander in the Empire, whose campaigns had shielded dozens of frontier systems. He bowed to the Emperor. "Your Majesty, I do not question the Founder Archive, but leadership requires more than wisdom. A future ruler must understand command under impossible pressure." I request one final strategic examination before the Empire accepts this without question. No anger in his voice, only duty. The Emperor turned to Mason. Champion, the law no longer requires you to accept. Mason answered at once. If it gives the Empire confidence in its future, I will gladly take part. Sarah's looked to him. You have already proven enough. He smiled. Sometimes the last doubt is the hardest one to remove. Within the hour, the Hall of Command became the largest tactical simulator the Empire had ever built. A living battlefield 3 miles wide, filled with mountain ranges, orbital stations, civilian colonies, supply routes, and countless moving fleets. Both commanders received identical resources and one objective: protect the civilian sectors while securing the central gateway before your opponent. Kaler showed exactly why he was a legend. His fleets advanced with extraordinary precision, controlling every approach while holding flawless defensive lines. Admirals nodded in admiration. Mason studied the display without issuing a single order. The human has finally met someone he cannot outthink, a senator whispered. But Sarah's kept watching Mason, not the battlefield. She had learned that his silence usually meant he was seeing something everyone else had missed. Finally, Mason moved his fleets, and to everyone's surprise, he pulled several ships away from the central gateway, toward isolated civilian settlements. Advisors muttered that he had abandoned the objective. Kaler pressed forward to seize the opening. Then the simulation revealed its hidden condition. Thousands of civilian evacuation vessels flooded the battlefield, crossing directly through the general's planned advance. Imperial safety regulations forced military formations to slow whenever civilian traffic occupied a strategic corridor. Kaler's perfect assault ground to a crawl. Mason had anticipated the hidden variable before it appeared. His repositioned fleet had already carved out protected evacuation lanes, letting civilian and military traffic flow together without delay. His forces reached the gateway first while preserving every civilian route. Blue light flooded the chamber. Maximum strategic score. Maximum civilian protection achieved. Silence. Kaler reviewed every recorded movement, then approached the human and offered up his command medallion. Mason gently closed the general's hand around it. Keep it. The Empire still needs commanders who put their people first. Kaler smiled for the first time that day. And today, the Empire learned that the strongest commander is not the one who reaches victory fastest, but the one who never forgets who the victory is meant to protect. The final challenge had ended exactly like everyone before it. The human had not defeated the Empire by proving its heroes wrong. He had shown them a better way to become the heroes they already wanted to be. 3 days later, the Emperor convened the Assembly of Houses, the highest gathering in the Empire, beneath a dome 1,000 feet wide, with delegates from more than 400 systems. By custom, the recognized successor would address the Empire for the first time. Princess Sarah stepped onto the central platform. Before she could speak, Lord Zurin Vale, head of one of the oldest dynasties, raised his ceremonial staff. Your Majesty, the archive may recognize the princess, but recognition is not the same as confidence. The frontier worlds deserve proof that she can unite those who never believed in her. Several delegates nodded. The challenge was political now, but the tension was every bit as sharp as the arena. Sarah stood ready to answer for herself, but Mason spoke first. May I offer a different test? Proceed. Mason faced the delegates. Instead of asking whether the princess can convince the Empire, ask whether the Empire has ever truly listened to her. Give every delegation one chance to ask her whatever matters most. No advisors, no prepared speeches, only honest answers. The Emperor accepted at once. One by one, they came forward. Frontier governors asked about isolated colonies. Scientists asked about long-term exploration. Merchants asked about economic stability. Commanders asked about protecting distant trade routes. Sarah's answered every question without hesitation. She recalled the names of remote system senators had forgotten. She quoted agricultural reports from neglected colonies. She explained how frontier families often solved problems years before the central government even noticed them. After every answer, the chamber grew quieter. Delegates who had expected uncertainty found preparation, compassion, and practical understanding. At last, Lord Zurin himself stepped forward. "Princess, after everything that has happened, what is the first change you would make as ruler?" She smiled gently. "I would require every future member of the Imperial Council to spend 1 month each year living on a frontier world, without royal privileges. A leader should experience the lives they hope to improve." Silence. Then applause began among the frontier representatives. Military governors joined. Scientists rose. Merchants followed. Within moments, the entire forum thundered with unanimous approval. Lord Zurin bowed his head. "Respectfully, Your Highness, today I realize the Empire never lacked a worthy leader. We lacked the wisdom to recognize one." Once again, Mason had won without taking the center. He never answered for the princess. He simply created the moment for the whole empire to discover what had been standing quietly before them all along. Less than 48 hours later, every long-range observatory in imperial space detected the same impossible signal. It came not from a neighbor, an unexplored system, or a hidden installation, but from an ancient navigation corridor that had vanished from every map thousands of years ago. In the Hall of Celestial Records, historians, admirals, and scientists gathered around a projection of forgotten stars stretching far beyond the Empire's borders. Princess Sarah's held the Founder's seal, its crystal glowing brighter than ever, one ancient symbol pulsing at the edge of the map. The archivist translated the newly awakened words. "The first bridge awaits the rightful guardian." No living scholar had ever seen them. The Emperor turned to Mason. "You have seen patterns none of us recognized. What does this mean?" Mason studied the projection. The Founders did not build an empire that ended here. They built one that expected future generations to keep reaching outward. Sarah's looked at the unfinished route. "You believe someone is still waiting?" Mason nodded. "Not someone expecting an invasion. Someone expecting a promise to be kept." Within hours, a small expedition departed. No battle fleet, only scientists, translators, historians, engineers, and a modest escort. Weeks earlier, the admirals would have sent hundreds of warships. Now they trusted a different approach, because the human had shown again and again that understanding often reached farther than intimidation. Emerging through the restored corridor, the expedition found a region unlike anything in modern record. Enormous luminous rings around a peaceful blue world, elegant orbital structures reflecting sunlight like floating crystal oceans. No defensive fleets, no warnings, only a single transmission. "To those who remember the first promise, you are welcome." Sarah's looked at Mason. They knew someone would return. A graceful vessel approached without escort. Its representatives came aboard carrying emblems strikingly like the Founder's seal, and their leader bowed to the princess. "For countless generations, we preserved the first covenant between our peoples. We feared the Empire had forgotten it forever." Sarah's raised the seal. "We almost did." Then history chose wisely. The representative turned to Mason with quiet curiosity. "Our oldest records also mention your world, humanity." He activated an ancient archive, and a message from the earliest days of the Alliance appeared. "When the day comes that pride blinds great civilizations, trust the humans who still recognize value where others see none." Even the Emperor lowered his head. The Founders had predicted that one day an outsider would restore what powerful rulers had forgotten. As the meeting went on, discovery replaced suspicion and cooperation replaced doubt, and two civilizations separated by centuries finally fulfilled a promise their ancestors had made. Watching humans and aliens trade knowledge beneath unfamiliar stars, without fear or arrogance, I realized the greatest strength the human had ever shown was never his intelligence, his courage, or his victories. It was his unshakable belief that every forgotten person, every forgotten promise, and every forgotten chance deserved to be seen, before the rest of the galaxy learned how to see it too. The voyage home felt different from any before it. The expedition had conquered no territory and defeated no enemy. It returned carrying something the Empire had nearly forgotten how to value: trust. As the flagship entered the capital system, thousands of civilian ships gathered peacefully along the ceremonial corridor, their lights stretching across space like rivers of stars, welcoming the explorers home. Princess Sarah stood at the observation window, holding the founder seal. She no longer looked like the overlooked daughter who once stood silently behind her sisters. She carried herself with confidence earned through wisdom rather than applause. Mason stayed beside her exactly as he always had, calm, observant, and entirely uninterested in the admiration spreading through the galaxy. The Emperor gathered every delegation in the Grand Convergence Arena where the story had begun. 100,000 spectators filled it again, but this time no one laughed when the human entered. Every person stood before he reached the center. Today, the Emperor announced, the Empire celebrates not a conquest but a promise fulfilled. Applause echoed beneath the dome, then softened. He turned to Mason. Champion, history will remember your victories. Tell us what reward you wish to receive. Every noble expected land, command, or eternal honor. Mason smiled. I already received it. The Emperor tilted his head. Explain. Mason looked to Sarah's, then to the Empire. I came here believing strength alone changed history. I was wrong. History changes the moment someone chooses to believe in the person everyone else has already dismissed. Sarah stepped beside him. The Empire believed the human rescued me, she said softly. The truth is that he rescued our ability to recognize one another. Even the oldest senators bowed their heads. Varric smiled. Kaler nodded. Lord Zurin laid a hand over his heart. Every person who had once questioned the human now understood the lesson they had spent so long resisting. The Emperor lifted the ancient imperial medallion, worn by every ruler for countless generations. Rather than placing it around Mason's neck, he held it high. This symbol will remain with the throne, but from today, every future ruler will study the example of the human who reminded an empire that wisdom begins where pride ends. The arena erupted into applause, unlike anything I had witnessed in all my years of service. Not the cheer for a warrior who defeated stronger foes, but the gratitude of a civilization that had rediscovered its own forgotten purpose. As the ceremony closed, the first ships of the reunited civilization entered imperial space, met not by warships but by ambassadors and explorers. Children from dozens of worlds waved from the galleries, while humans and aliens stood side by side without suspicion. And I finally understood why the human had seemed so calm from the very beginning. He never came to prove that humanity was greater than the galaxy. He came to prove that true greatness begins the moment someone sees value where everyone else sees failure. The Forgotten Princess became the leader her people had always needed, because one human refused to follow the crowd. And from that single choice, an empire remembered its past, discovered its future, and taught the stars that the strongest civilizations are not built by those who chase the greatest prize, but by those wise enough to recognize it before anyone else ever can.